So in this video, I'm going to look at creating this table using the custom tables function. I don't recommend trying to mix summary statistics using the custom tables when you're generating them. However, you can put them together after you've made them so that you're presenting a single table here for your table 1. Maybe I'll just give this a number. And I'll call this demographic characteristics. And we would probably write a little bit more in the caption for table 1. Before I do anything else, I'm just going to get the numbers for each of these categories because I want to keep an eye on the missing data as we go. And it's surprisingly easy to overlook the missing data because often SPSS will just ignore it, even if you give it a missing data code. So what I'm going to do is let's just summarize the passenger class. And put these numbers in here. So we've got first class 323, second class 277, third class, there's a lot of people in third class, 709, and overall we had 1309. Usually when I create tables, I cut and paste them into Excel and I do all the formatting in Excel just because it's a bit more flexible. If you're not very confident with SPSS, it may be easier for you to draw this table up in Word and just manually cut and paste the numbers that you need across. But I'll show you how to use the custom tables because if you're working with a very large data set, this will probably be more efficient than doing it by hand in Word. So let's pretend that I have a lot more categorical variables and I'll summarize them first and then we'll look at doing these continuous variables. Just for the sake of the example, I'm going to treat sibling and spouses and parents and children as ordinal variables, just so I've got a few more categories to count up for a larger table. In practice, I don't even know if I'm interested in these variables, and that might not be how I summarize them. If I was doing this for real, maybe I would be interested in if you had 0, 1, 2 or more than 2, or maybe I would add them up for a total. Maybe I would use the median, I'm not sure. So let's have a look at summarizing categories using the custom tables, and that is under tables, custom tables. We'll just reset that and start from scratch. Now there's a lot of things that can go unexpectedly fiddly in this, which is why I wouldn't normally teach with this in a first course in statistics. So if you have done a first course and you've never seen this option, you've only seen the descriptive stats on the other part of the menu, it's probably for the same reason that I don't tend to use it, and that's just because there's so many fiddly things that can go wrong. It is helpful to think about the table that you want first because you get to decide where you put everything, and that's a lot easier if you have already decided where you want to put everything. I know that I want passenger class in the columns, so I'm going to drag that in. And here I can see first, second, and third. Now I do also want the total. So there's options here for how to move stuff around, but I would probably stick with the default layout unless you need it to do something very specific, and then maybe play around with some of those options. Here I've got categories and totals, so if I click into that, there is a box here to get the total count as well. So I'm going to apply that, and now I've got my total column. It's guessing that I want to count things. If I happen to drag in a scale variable, it'll change its mind and go, maybe you want the mean instead. I don't want the mean instead. I would really want to take a look at age before I decide how to summarize it. So I'm going to drag that out, and I'm just going to stick with things I do want to count. Now, if I look at these, this is a string variable, and these two have been coded, well, they are numbers, which means that SPSS can do different things with them. If I have a bunch of variables that are all really similar, I would drag them in at the same time. And then while they're all selected, if I want the categories and totals, so let's imagine we've got 10 variables down here, I only have to tick that once and then it will apply it to all of them. So if you have a lot of similar variables, it's helpful to work with them all together in that way. this is a different variable. So if I drag them in all together, because it's a string variable, I'm not getting any option here. So this is the type of fiddly thing that can be quite frustrating when you're trying to work out how to do something. So if I bring in the sex by itself, I can get the total. And then if I bring in these two, because they're both numbers, they can be worked with together. Now you might be wondering, why do I want the total here anyway? That seems like a lot of extra numbers on the table. And I probably don't want the total on the table, but what I do want to know is if there is any missing data. And one of the things that can happen is that SPSS just won't tell you that there's missing data, and unless you happen to notice that the totals don't add up, you won't realize that you've got missing data in your categories. So I would put the total at the top of my table, as I did in Word, and I would put the total under each of these variables just so I can check it, and then I would probably delete it at the end. If you have got a string variable, it will count up the blanks for you. So there are no blanks in sex, so I'm just going to drag the ticket across so we can see what happens with the blanks. I'll press OK on that. So male and female total, sibling spouse total, and then for ticket, we've got this blank here, but it doesn't actually say missing. So it doesn't tell you that you're missing. You just get these 69 blanks, but at least they're counted up for you. So that's why I would add in the total. And here we can see we've got the same total each time, 323, 323, 323, and we had 323 in first class. So there's no missing data for first class. So that means I can then probably remove the total. I'm going to leave it in there for now, just while we work through it. I'm going to take out the ticket price. Now, all I've got at the moment is the count, and I also want the percentage in here. So if I click on, it's going to check which one. Okay, we've got to click on this one. Sometimes I forget where I'm clicking. This is what I want now, is I want to think about the summary statistics. I can change the label for this count. So if I just want it to show N, I can do that. I can choose the format and the decimal places. Now, if we're counting something, we really don't need decimal places, so I don't want any. I want the percentages, and I need to choose how I want the percentages done up. Now, I think what I want, and in most cases what you'll want, is the percentages going down the columns. So I want to be able to say within first class, this percentage were men and this percentage were women. And then I can compare that with the sex ratio in second and third class. So I want the column percentages. So I'm going to put that in here. If you think you're going to forget what type of percentage you've got, then leave this full label in to remind you. If you will remember, then you can just have the percentage sign. I've got one decimal place, that sounds fine. I'm going to leave this format in so you can see what it looks like, but normally I would take it out, and I'll probably go back and do that in a second. So now I've got the N and the percentage. Okay. So this is a really busy table. And one of the things you'll find when you're looking through published examples is we don't put the percentage in every single cell because it's too busy. It's too much repeated information. We've already said that this is a percentage column, and somewhere we said N percentage anyway. So we don't need this percentage sign. And that's why I would take it out. So I'm going to go back into the summary statistics. I'm going to take it out. Now you may have noticed that there's an option here to put it in brackets. And this might be what you want. The problem I have found, because we often display N and then the percentage number in brackets, the problem I have found with this is that it doesn't cut and paste into Excel. And if I want to do any manipulating, it then causes me a problem at that stage. So if I go OK on that one, I'm going to copy this. and remove the formatting. I don't know why it does that, but it's removed the brackets. If I just paste it as is, it's actually kept the brackets. But then as soon as I try to remove the brackets, because I really don't like this formatting, it's put a negative sign there. Now, someone might be able to tell me why it does that or if there's a quick way to fix it, but I usually just avoid it by not putting the brackets in that case. I'm just going to quickly check what happens if we do that in Word. And it has pasted okay. I'm just going to see if I can remove the formatting. Okay, so that's actually not too bad. The only problem maybe is that you don't want these in different columns. So what you'll often see in papers is that within the one column, it has 144, 44.6, and there's no separate column there. So if you're going for that type of formatting, this is easier to do in Excel. I'm going to delete this. I'm actually going to delete all of this. I need to completely delete the columns to remove the formatting. And if I go back to SPSS, and I'm going to take out the brackets, and I just have the numbers now. It can be helpful to keep this total table, the full table, in an Excel file, even just before editing it. So I'm going to paste that as text. I'm going to call this table 1. And then maybe I would have another one that's table 1 formatted, where I have the final formatting in it, just in case I need to check anything. So in this case, because there is, let's see, there's no missing data here, 277, 709. I don't have any missing data, so I don't need these total columns. If there was missing data in here, then I would change this total to be a missing row. And you can do that in Excel. Put in the missing, and that's equal to, and that's where we would need to know what the total was, 323. Subtract that number there, whatever the total was, and that will give us the missing. And in this case, there's no missing data. So you can get Excel to do some of this for you. So I'm going to delete that row. I don't need that row. And I don't need that row. The other thing that you might want to do is if you want the N and percentage in brackets formatted for you, because it's a very long table and it hasn't come out the way you want it, this really depends on how fussy you are about your formatting. If you're happy having them in separate columns, then you can do that. If you really want them together, then there is a concatenate function in Excel where you can join it together. So let me zoom in and I'll show you how this works. And you can choose whether or not you need it for what you're doing. So if I want to change this column here to be N and then percentage in brackets, I'll go equals, because we're going to use a formula, concatenate, which is that formula. We want this cell, and then for each extra thing we want to add onto it, we give it a comma. Now what I want is a space and then a bracket. So I'm going to need to put that in inverted commas. My keyboard's wrong. So space, bracket. Then inside the bracket, I want what's in this cell, comma, and then the next thing I want is the close bracket in inverted commas, close bracket to close the whole concatenate function. So now we've got the N percentage. I don't need to write that out every time. I can just drag that down, and then it has formatted this for me. So depending on what you want to do, that may be an option for you. it can be a little bit fiddly when you try to go across the rows. So if I extend this out for the rest of them, what you'll notice is that it's gone wrong a little bit because it's only shifted across one, whereas we actually needed to shift it across two. So if I click on this, you'll see it's actually concatenating this column and this column. So I just need to fix that up. That one's okay. This is our third class. So now that's okay. And then this should be our total. So now that I've fixed those up, I can copy the formula down. And I have all of them formatted nicely. So this has been quite a long video, and you can see that it is quite fiddly if you're very fussy about your formatting. If you're okay with the default way that SPSS does it in separate columns, then you can sort of skip a lot of this messing about. But if you do want it formatted exactly how you're seeing in the papers that you're reading, then this might be the easiest way to do it. So in the next video, I'll have a look at summarizing continuous variables in the custom tables option. And we'll just briefly go back over some of the checks we do before summarizing continuous variables.